Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Continuing on that theme by Congressman Marshall, Dr. Belzer, in your testimony, you just discussed a range of consumer responses to no longer being able to purchase gliders. Can you elaborate a little bit more about those potential consumer responses and how the Phase 2 rule, even if it was hypothetically based on valid scientific studies, which I think there's been substantial doubt raised about that, would be counterproductive to what the regulators hope to achieve in the first place?
Well, a common phenomenon with regulations that make major changes in, let's say, tailpipe emission standards is that they do have effects on the market. And so there will often be what's called a pre-buy. The regulations will go into effect in a few years, and during that period of time, those who would be interested in purchasing trucks later will purchase them sooner in order to get in under the wire and do that. So that we can predict that. I believe in EPA's Phase 1 greenhouse gas rule, they took that into account. For some reason, they didn't do that this time. But that is a known phenomenon. I've seen articles in the press suggesting that there are long waits now for vehicles for heavy-duty trucks. Some of that is driven by the economy, but part of it is a predictable response to the high cost of the Phase 2 standards. You should expect a lot of truck sales to occur prior to that in order to beat that. That happens normally. It happens in trucks. It happens in automobiles as well. It's a normal phenomenon, and that's why the Clean Air Act has it has a provision in it in order to requires that the effective date for new standards to be delayed a few years so that manufacturers can catch up and be prepared to accommodate that.
What I find interesting about a lot of this and listening to the questions from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, bringing up these various problems from emissions, is that since 1980, our economy's expanded by probably close to 500%. Vehicle miles have gone up 98%. Population's up over 30%. The energy consumption's up over 30%. Emissions are down by over 50%. And a lot of the discussion here is around like asthma rates. Asthma rates are at record levels, even though the air quality is substantially improved. So I think that you know, the typical scare tactics from the left on these things that completely misses the real problem. A lot of it has to do with living conditions, household conditions, but I know that doesn't matter to a lot of people. The facts don't. So let me go on and ask Mr. Long a question. You know, in my district, I have over 360 owner-operators. Can you, you made a statement that I'd like for you to elaborate on. You said there's not a shortage of drivers. That's not been our experience.
Sure. If you look at the driver turnover rate among large motor carriers, it's above 90% a year. So essentially, they're almost having 2 drivers per position in the course of a year. We think that's the actual problem, that they're turning through drivers at an exceptional rate. We think steps can be taken by Congress to ensure that our career is one that is appealing and one that is sustainable, rather than one where a young driver enters with no hope of making an actual career out of it because he doesn't make the money, he works in difficult conditions, and no one's really working to address either of those. So we think that rate could certainly come down among smaller fleets. The turnover rate is typically much lower. Drivers get paid better. They have more uniform schedules. They're home with their families more. And those are all steps that can be taken on a national level to certainly address the turnover problem.
The turnover problem, though, how does that impact the individual driver in terms of the more cost that gets added by regulations, and particularly if this, how it impacts with the glider rule?
Sure. Well, this is an example of an area where our members are being priced out of the industry. And let's keep in mind that our members, owner-operators, are the safest on the road by far.
Well, can you put that in context to the bottom line, you know, their take-home pay versus expense?
Yeah, a lot of what we've been talking about in purchasing new trucks is, well, our members can save 25% on glider kits. That's not necessarily the discussion, simply because they can't afford the new trucks. They're not really saving anything if they can't afford it in the first place. So for them, a glider is an affordable option that also improves their MPGs. It improves their reliability. So as far as bottom lines are concerned, our members run on the slimmest of margins. So expecting them to be capable of purchasing a new truck, it's just not realistic.
Mr. Chair, my time has expired. I will make a comment to you, though. You and I have talked about this issue of air quality and asthma, and even CDC and others have indicated that this link that is occasionally they try to make, for instance, in a hearing like this, is missing the mark, and I appreciate your indulgence. I yield back.
Very much.